Welcome back to the Eric Crown Crypto channel. Wishing you a happy and healthy start to the site's Monday morning over here. It's a new week, baby. We got a new cave, new week, and there's also an emergency Fed meeting, which is not really an emergency. I think there's a lot of commotion made over very, very little. But I did want to follow up on the short-term timeframes. Still, more or less, it's the same thing as before. But there is a completely new thing to be aware of on the higher-term timeframes. So it's not necessarily completely new, but I have not spoken about it on this channel at all whatsoever, which I'm very, very happy to be presenting today. Other than that, I wanted to quickly shill my good old Instagram, as I've been uploading trading-related content, Bitcoin-related content, also personal stuff as well, which may or may not be for you. Of course, there is a link in the description below, and they also got Bybit still with their promotion, of which I've not really been doing a good job promoting, but it's 0% on maker fees, not just for spot orders, which I believe they're offering for everyone right now, but if you use the link in the description below, it'll also offer you 0% fees on maker orders for derivatives as well, which is actually really, really powerful, at least something that I quite literally care about. So there you go. All right, sweet. So let's just jump right into it right here and start it off with the lower term timeframes, of which I'll be referencing the full hour on CME, as we got CME back open and trading. Well, still overall in the same range. Range resolution short term to the upside would still be along the same level, essentially 19,750 on a 4-hour closure on CME. If that were to occur, I would be looking for Bitcoin to make another run somewhere around the 0.5 here, which is in the mid $20,000 territory. And if it could even just trade above the 27th of September high, I would extend that target another $1,000, maybe a little more than $1,000 all the way up here, with potential for more, that being the $21,500 region. By the same token, and what I think is a little more likely, at least in the short term, is Bitcoin to test the bottom side of the range yet again. That is not the same thing as a range breakdown here, obviously, but anywhere, into the mid 18s or so is fair game. And if we were to actually witness a break of the bottom side of this, I would still only be using higher term time frame closures here, just because it's such a major area, which does imply that if Bitcoin were to actually break it, we're very likely looking at targets much lower. And we'll reference these stats, the new stats, I should say, a little bit later to kind of get another sort of visual on what to expect from that. So what essentially would define as a range resolution to the downside, like at least a 12-hour closure on CME below the lowest wick that we do observe on this current range, which is about 18,100. By this, also something to be aware of right here is the 4-hour BBWP is expanding off of lows right now, so we're probably going to be looking at moves sometime around that that Fed meeting a little bit later today. Even if it's really not like a big deal, markets typically do still move in the short term, and that will give the potential for an actual range resolution. Again, we've kind of covered what that would look like on an upside or a downside placement right there. And in short term, yeah, I think that Bitcoin probably does test the bottoms of the range or somewhere around there, in the interim. Should also be aware that the 12-hour RSI on CME starting to lose the moving average right there, also rejected from the neutral zone. That accompanied by extremely low BBWP, looking for expansion off of these lows, and even the daily as well, by the way. This is the daily, which is like literally at the lowest levels that we've seen basically since the August breakdown. I'm still very much biased towards a range resolution, very likely this week, early October, that is. Referencing short-term timeframe stochastic momentum, we can start off here with the 12-hour timeframe. It will actually turn back down below 19,450, any sort of a closure below there, in 3 hours, 6 minutes, and 3 seconds, and counting, by the way. 6-hour will also be turning down below 19,300. The 4-hour pivot is also 19,900, so significantly higher than the other two, which is rather interesting. And then the hourly is going to be flippy-floppy, but up right now at 19,000. So extremely short term, probably some more sideways around the time that US markets open up later. And of course, around that Fed meeting as well. If these pivots are still maintained, yes, I would have a bias at least towards testing the bottom side of this range. Obviously, that gives us potential to break, but price action will let you know if that's relevant or not. Anyways, also one last thing, not on CME, but on spot price action, should be aware that there is a drive of, hey, stop that trading view. There is a drive of hidden phantom bearish divergence right there. Phantom hidden bearish divergence is what I'm trying to say. Let's see, does it look better over here? No, it's the same thing basically. Of which, again, a little bit more biased towards a test towards a downside. But as far as actual range resolutions and next major, maybe even macro targets, included, I would still not really make anything of that until we actually have a full-on closure below that level. All right, now let's get into the fun stuff. So I wanted to first follow up on, or not follow up on, but present something completely new. Is my Wesley Snipes hand still there? Okay, good. All right, so no one's gonna know my dirty secrets. Anyways, it's like let your mind run wild. Who knows what the fuck that means? Anyways, here is the daily for CME. We're looking at a volatility versus stochastic momentum signature. So this signal is gonna go into the box with the 5-day and the 2-day, both of which the 5-day and the 2-day are still active. The daily for CME, however, is awaiting activation, if you will. So first things first, what are we looking at? Well, volatility in this case is going to be represented by this indicator here, the BBWP. It is at the lowest levels as we discussed earlier since basically August, which was the breakdown from $25,000 to $18,000, and also June actually of this year as well, which was also a breakdown. Now, volatility being low does not automatically mean it's always going to be a breakdown. Of course, we've seen upside moves based off these low reads as well. It's direction neutral basically. But in the last, almost 10, 11 months now, yeah, it has been all to the downside as, Bitcoin has kind of been, in a downside market, kind of crazy. Anyways, in this case, what we've observed whenever we've seen these extreme lows on daily CME BBWP, which is anything below basically 10 percentile is kind of how I define that. The full history of CME, which is why I really, really like this one because it doesn't take as much time to back test by hand, but the full history of CME, the average move based upon that signature has been about 24.19%. The first standard deviation for that move would imply a range between about 15% to all the way up to 33.31%. So we can kind of get, generalized targets, areas of interest at least, if and when we do have resolution, which we naturally will. I mean, this is mathematically designed to expand, so it will be happening. The stochastic oscillator has been correct on the volatility expansion direction 83.33% of the time. So very, very high hit rate here. Again, we're talking about statistics, not certainties. So please understand that, as I fear that some people conflate the two. It's obviously you can't have that, or at least I don't think that you can have that. And then of course, if we were to look at the average days taken from the signal given to the next major high or low, about almost 16 days. And if we were to take a first standard deviation of that, that'd give us a range between about just over a week all the way up to just over 3 weeks. So a lot of stats on this one. So what would essentially define the signal actually becoming active? Well, what we need to see is on the daily BBWP here, we need to see expansive posturing, which means that the BBWP itself must have a positive slope. The more positive, the better, or the more steep, the better. And also above the moving average, which with also the moving average having a full-on positive slope. That would be like full-on confirmation. Obviously, people who are more aggressive will just go off of maybe a little bit of that or less of that. And then the direction of the stochastic oscillator gives a bias for that expansion direction. So right now, it is pointed to the upside. So as long as Bitcoin maintains above this pivot, this momentum pivot, which is 18,550 specifically on CME, then of course, it's more likely to expand to the upside. And if we were to take that from where this signal is kind of being populated here, we could, let me go back to my stats. I forget what they are already. All right, 20. Let's go with the bottom side of the first deviation, then the the average. So in this case, we're looking at 15% puts Bitcoin at about $23,000. That would obviously imply a wick above the 27th of September high. So we could probably just extend that target, basically another $500 to $1,000 based off of the earlier portion of this analysis. And the 24% would bring Bitcoin all the way up to about $23,000. So again, we're looking at, some relatively decent moves here. And 33%, which is the top side of the first deviation, would bring Bitcoin all the way back up to 24 to maybe even $25,000, which would be rather nice. By the same token, let's say Bitcoin closes below the momentum pivot tonight, then the statistics will be, of course, more relevant, or at least more viable towards the downside, awaiting expansion for confirmation. But if that were to happen, let's just do the same thing to the downside. And in this case, 15% puts Bitcoin at about $17,000, or a little bit below $17,000. I doubt that Bitcoin would just kind of stop there. The average move at 24% puts Bitcoin at about $15,000. I think that that's still a little bit more reasonable. And the top side of the first deviation would put Bitcoin significantly lower. We're talking like 13-ish, 13 and a half or so. So those would kind of be the areas of interest going onwards and forwards from here. On top of that, so we just kind of covered that signal. On top of that, the 5-day obviously closed last night as well. And there's something incredibly interesting about the 5-day here. So if you remember yesterday, the 5-day stochastic momentum pivot was like 19,200 or something like that. It was like low $19,000 territory. We've got the new tick on this, and the pivot now has actually gone up significantly to 21,150. What does that mean? It means that if Bitcoin fails within this next 5-day period to rally back above about 21,000 bucks, which obviously has implications much higher than that based off of the signal that we just looked at, because that would likely feed into it, then very likely we're going to see continued downside here. Very, very likely in the next 5 days. Again, assuming that you don't see that level hit. But let's say the Fed comes out later and they're like, hey, we decided to herp your derp and everyone's, concerned now, so we're going to cut rates. I think that's unlikely, but hey, just at spitball in a situation where this might happen, yeah, you'll probably see that move to the upside, obviously, and all of those things will start to fall in line with each other. If you don't see that, then probably not. But again, the daily for CME, I think is going to be a lot more interesting just because this one's going to update each and every day. So we don't have to wait for the 2-day or the 5-day, of which those, just take naturally more time. So we got yet another thing, another signal kind of getting combined with the other ones. They're naturally going to feed into each other. And I thought that that was rather interesting. So you can kind of see what's at stake here for both sides. If you're bullish, I mean, obviously you're starting to look at this as like a rounded low here. If you're bearish, you're just looking at trend, I suppose. But other than that, I think that's a good place for me to kind of leave off and wish you the best as always. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully soon.